Good Shabbos. Parshas Zachor begins and ends with the same instruction, but stated in opposite ways. It begins with Zachor, to remember, and ends with Lo tishkach, don't forget. Remembering and not forgetting are essentially the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. While we may see it that way, the rabbis, however, teach us that each formulation, both Zachor and Lo tishkach, suggests something unique. They represent two distinct mitzvos. One, a mitzvah's essay, a positive mitzvah to remember how Amalek attacked Bnei Yisrael, and another mitzvah, a lo sa'aseh, a negative commandment warning us not to forget what Amalek did. But why do we need both of these mitzvos? Why do we need a mitzvah to remember and a mitzvah not to forget? Some say that the lo sa'aseh, the mitzvah not to forget, is strictly balev, in the heart, to keep this memory of Amalek in our hearts all the time. While Zachor, the positive mitzvah, means bapeh, with our mouths, to verbally express out loud what Amalek represents, and this we must do once a year by reading Parshas Zachor from the Torah, as we will this Shabbos. But I'd like to offer another approach to why we have these two mitzvos, based on an insight from Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch. Rabbi Hirsch explains that the Torah's double mandate is to not only remember Amalek for who they are, we must also remember Amalek to ensure that we never emulate them. Amalek represents the very opposite of what it means to be a Jew, what it means to be someone charged with upholding tzedek umishpat, righteousness and justice, love of all people, especially those most vulnerable. To quote the translation of Rabbi Hirsch, "Forget this not. When you yourself have to suffer under Amalek's coarseness and power, keep upright, keep your humaneness and respect for that which is right as your God has taught you." In other words, Lo tishkach is a call to Jewish pride in our Jewish values. Note well what Rabbi Hirsch added, that even when we suffer from Amalek, we should never forget who we are, never forget our special mission. Most importantly, we should never let the persecutions of Amalek influence us to behave in kind. Because the values of the Torah will always defeat the cruelty, brutality, and violence that Amalek represents. So while Zachor means to remember who Amalek is, Lo tishkach means we should never forget who we are and what our values are when we confront Amalek. This important lesson is reflected in a famous quote from Golda Meir, who said that when peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons, for us to betray our values, the values embodied in Lo tishkach. I think there is another lesson here, a lesson for our daily practical lives. When we get involved in debates and conflicts, when we encounter people with values different than our own, it's easy to lose sight of our own values. It's easy for everyone, for good people, to get swept up in the give and take and forget to bring humaneness and kindness even to difficult situations. To willfully abandon those values is to follow Amalek. To constantly remind ourselves of these values is to fulfill Lo tishkach, never forget what it means to be a Jew. Good Shabbos.